Have you ever felt your heart race at the sight of a snake, only to realize it might not be real? What would you do if a deadly snake suddenly appeared before you on a calm afternoon? Could your mind be tricking you into believing danger is real? How far can fear take control over reason? What if the horrifying threat you dread most is actually harmless? And what shocking twist awaits the man in Ambrose Bierce's The Man and the Snake? Stay tuned as we unravel this reimagined classic of psychological suspense and dark humor. Classic Storytime Hub presents The Man and the Snake by Ambrose Bierce, reimagined. It was said by many learned men, so many in fact that no scholar dared dispute it, that the eyes of a serpent held a strange magnetic power. Anyone who met that gaze would be drawn forward, powerless, until the creature's bite claimed them. Harker Brayton lounged on his sofa, dressed comfortably in his robe and slippers, a faint smile tugging at his lips as he read the passage in Marvels of Science by old Morrister. The only marvel, he murmured to himself, is that anyone in Morrister's day could take such nonsense seriously. Even the most ignorant today would scoff. His mind wandered, as it often did, threading through ideas and reflections. Unconsciously, he lowered the book, yet his eyes didn't follow. Something in the dim corner of the room, barely more than a shadow under the bed, tugged at his attention. Two tiny points of light glimmered there, no more than an inch apart. Perhaps reflections from the gas lamp above, bouncing off metal nails. He barely registered them and returned to his reading. But a strange impulse stirred, a pull he could not name. The book dropped again, and his gaze returned to that corner. The lights had not moved, but they burned brighter now, with an eerie greenish glow he hadn't noticed before. Closer, maybe. He couldn't be certain. Still, the shadows obscured their form, hiding whatever was waiting, and again he tried to focus on the book. Yet even as he turned the page, a small, unshakable thrill of unease had rooted itself in the pit of his stomach. Something waited in the darkness, something watching. Suddenly, a single line in the text jolted Brayton, a spark of thought striking him so sharply that he let the book slip for the third time. It tumbled from the sofa, landing upside down on the floor. Half rising, heart thudding, he fixed his eyes on the shadowed corner beneath the bed. The points of light burned brighter now, almost alive, flickering with a strange intensity. His curiosity sharpened into a kind of urgent fear. And then he saw it. Coiled beneath the footboard, a massive serpent lay in wait. Those gleaming points were no mere reflections. They were eyes, cold and calculating, staring directly into his own. Its head, flattened and resting atop the outer coils, advanced slightly, the wide, brutal jaw and grotesque, dull forehead signaling pure malice. The eyes were no longer just lights. They conveyed a meaning, a chilling intelligence, and a silent promise of harm. A snake in the bedroom of a modern city apartment was, of course, extraordinary, but Brayton's life had never been ordinary. At 35, he was a bachelor, a scholar, an idler, and something of an athlete, well-traveled, wealthy, and in robust health. His tastes, always on the luxurious side, had only grown more indulgent after years of deprivation abroad. When even the finest accommodations at the Castle Hotel proved insufficient, he had eagerly accepted the invitation of his friend, Dr. Druring, a renowned scientist, to stay in his elegant San Francisco home. Yet here, in the quiet comfort of civilization, in the shadow of modern luxury, something ancient and primal had made its presence known, something that demanded his attention and his fear. Dr. Druring's house stood like a relic from another era, a stately, somewhat stubborn presence in a quiet, forgotten corner of the city. Its walls seemed to refuse the encroaching modernity around it, carrying the air of pride and aloofness. The architecture itself hinted at eccentricity, an eccentricity born of isolation. Most striking of all was a peculiar wing jutting from the house, its purpose as mysterious as its design. Part laboratory, part menagerie, part museum, it was Dr. Druring's sanctuary, a domain where science and obsession intertwined. Here he indulged his fascination with the animal kingdom, though his tastes leaned toward the unusual, the overlooked, the lowly creatures most people dismissed. For Dr. Druring, only beings that retained a touch of primal reptilian ancestry, snakes, toads, and their kin, were worthy of true study. He called himself the Zola of zoology, a scholar with a profound affection for nature's underlings. His wife and daughters, however, were denied entry. They could not, he believed, appreciate the elegance and subtlety of his scaly subjects. Instead, they were confined to the more conventional comforts of domestic life, surrounded by the luxury his fortune allowed. Outwardly, they shone more brightly than the reptiles themselves, but within the mysterious wing, Dr. Druring's beloved creatures ruled supreme, silent, watchful, and utterly fascinating to him. The snakery itself was a study in austere simplicity, its design and furnishings deliberately modest, an odd sort of luxury suited to the unusual tenants it housed. For most of them, freedom had to be limited. Many could not safely handle true indulgence, for they were alive, and alive in ways that demanded caution. Within their own spaces, however, the creatures moved with near complete liberty, constrained only to prevent the occasional disastrous tendency to devour one another. Brayton had been warned carefully and with a certain grim humor that some of the inhabitants had, on occasion, appeared in parts of the house where their presence was most inconvenient. Yet, despite the snakery's oddities and the uncanny atmosphere that clung to it, Brayton found life at the Druring mansion remarkably agreeable. At first, surprise and a shudder of instinctive revulsion coursed through him, but no true fear. His first impulse was to ring for a servant, yet the bell cord, dangling just within reach, remained untouched. Calling for help might suggest fear, and Brayton was conscious of only one thing, the absurd incongruity of the moment. It was revolting, yes, but laughably so, almost theatrical. The serpent itself was unlike anything Brayton had ever seen. Its full length was hidden in the shadows, but the portion visible was as thick as his forearm. How dangerous was it? Venomous, perhaps? A constrictor? Brayton's knowledge of nature offered no clear answer. He had never fully deciphered the subtle warnings that distinguish threat from harmlessness. All he knew was that the creature's gaze was locked on him, and in that gaze lay an intelligence that was disturbingly deliberate. If the creature posed no real danger, it was at least thoroughly offensive, completely out of place. It was the wrong note in an otherwise orderly world, a savage jewel awkwardly dropped into civilized decor. Even the bold, somewhat barbaric tastes of contemporary society, walls crowded with paintings, floors layered with furniture, and tables cluttered with trinkets, could not justify the presence of this fragment of jungle life in Dr. Druring's refined home. And worse, an insufferable thought, the subtle, musty odor of its breath mingled with the very air Brayton himself was inhaling. These reflections, swirling in his mind, gradually hardened into action. Thought became decision. Consideration became movement. It is the strange, delicate alchemy of human will, a tension between impulse and intellect, between muscle and mind. Like a fallen leaf caught in the autumn wind, the intelligence of each choice great or small, reveals itself in how we fall, how we move, and whether we land on solid ground or in water. Brayton rose quietly to his feet. He would back away, slowly, carefully, keeping his distance from the serpent if possible, and make for the door. It was the same instinct that guides a man in the presence of greatness. Retreat without provoking, for power is threat, and threat demands respect. He knew he could move backward with precision, and if the serpent followed, the room itself seemed to provide. Mounted along the walls, an array of exotic weapons, oriental swords, daggers, and spears offered a grim promise of defense should he need it. Meanwhile, the snake's eyes glowed brighter, the malevolence behind them sharpening, merciless and watchful. The longer Brayton lingered, the more he felt the weight of that gaze pressing down on him, a silent demand for acknowledgement, or worse. Brayton lifted his right foot, preparing to step backward, and froze. An unshakable aversion gripped him. "I am supposed to be brave," he thought. "Is courage nothing but pride? Shall I retreat merely because no one is watching?" His right hand pressed against the back of a chair, steadying himself, foot suspended mid-air. "Nonsense," he muttered aloud. "I am no coward. I will not allow myself to fear, not even in my own eyes." With a tense flex of the knee, he planted his foot an inch ahead of the other. Confusion rippled through him. How had it moved? The left foot followed the same inexplicable path, stepping forward despite his will. His hand clutched the chair, arms stretched behind him as if unwilling to relinquish it. The snake's head remained thrust from the innermost coil, neck level, unmoving, but its eyes had changed. They were no longer mere glimmers. They were electric, crackling sparks that radiated endless, dazzling needles of light. Brayton's face had gone ashen. Another step forward, dragging the chair partly with him, ended in a crash as it fell to the floor. He groaned. The snake made no sound, no motion, yet its eyes blazed like twin suns, flooding the room with waves of color that seemed alive. The rings of vivid light expanded and vanished like soap bubbles, alternately approaching his face and receding into an immeasurable distance. The room, the air, even time itself seemed suspended, dominated entirely by those blazing, impossible eyes. A distant rhythm began to pulse in Brayton's mind, the steady, resonant beat of some colossal drum, accompanied by fleeting strains of music, impossibly sweet, like the whispering notes of an Aeolian harp caught in the wind. For a moment he was transported. He could almost feel himself among the reeds along the Nile, listening to the sunrise hymn of Memnon's statue, a melody untouched by centuries, majestic and eternal. Gradually the music faded, or rather transformed, becoming the distant roll of a retreating thunderstorm. Before him unfolded a fantastical landscape, glittering with sunlight and rain, arched by a vivid rainbow that framed 100 shimmering cities within its vast curve. And there, in the middle distance, a colossal serpent, crowned and magnificent, lifted its head from coils wider than he could measure. Its gaze was impossibly familiar, his dead mother's eyes staring back at him with haunting intent. Then the vision shifted violently, as though the stage itself had been lifted and swept away, leaving only emptiness. Something struck him hard across the chest and face. He crashed to the floor, blood running from his broken nose, his lips bruised. Dazed, stunned, he lay with his eyes closed, face pressed against the floor, trying to gather himself. Moments later, clarity returned. The fall had broken the spell. He realized that if he kept his gaze averted, he might finally retreat. but the thought of the serpent so close, perhaps coiled and ready to strike just out of sight, was unbearable. Steeling himself, he raised his head. He looked again into those malevolent, luminous eyes, and instantly he was trapped once more, utterly ensnared by their power. The snake had not moved. Its earlier hypnotic power over Brayton's imagination seemed to have waned. The brilliant, otherworldly visions that had swept over him moments before were gone. What remained were the creature's eyes, black, beady, merciless, glittering beneath that flat, inexpressive brow with a malice that needed no flourish. It was as if the serpent, certain of its dominance, had abandoned all tricks and charms. And then came the most harrowing scene. Brayton lay prone on the floor, barely a yard from his relentless adversary. Slowly, painfully, he lifted his upper body on his elbows, arching his head back, legs stretched to their full length. His face, pale beneath streaks of blood, was rigid with tension. His eyes were wide, straining to their limits. Froth gathered on his lips, flaking and falling to the floor. Convulsions coursed through him, rippling through his body in serpent-like waves. He bent at the waist, twisting his legs side to side, each movement inching him closer to the snake. He thrust his hands forward to brace himself, yet every effort brought him nearer to the waiting coils. The struggle was surreal, grotesque, a battle between human will and instinctual terror. Meanwhile, in another part of the house, Dr. Druring and his wife sat calmly in the library. The scientist was unusually cheerful. "I have just acquired, through an exchange with another collector," he said, "a magnificent specimen of the Ophiophagus." "And what, pray, is that?" his wife asked with a mild, almost bored curiosity. "Why, my dear, what shocking ignorance!" he exclaimed. "A man who discovers after marriage that his wife does not know Greek deserves a divorce. The Ophiophagus is a snake that eats other snakes." "I hope it eats all of yours," she said absent-mindedly, shifting the lamp. "But how does it catch the other snakes? By hypnotizing them, I suppose?" "That's just like you, dear," Dr. Druring replied with a mock pout. "You know how irritating I find any mention of that old superstition about a snake's supposed charm." Then came a cry, a scream so raw and terrible it shattered the quiet of the house like the howl of a demon trapped in stone. Again and again it echoed, each time more distinct, more horrifying. The couple leapt to their feet. The man was confused, the lady pale and speechless, terror frozen in her gaze. Before the echoes even faded, Dr. Druring was racing up the stairs, 2 steps at a time. In the corridor outside Brayton's room, he encountered a few startled servants who had come running from above. Together they burst into the chamber without knocking. Brayton lay motionless on his stomach. His head and arms were partly hidden beneath the footboard of the bed. They pulled him free, turning the body over. His face was smeared with blood and froth, eyes wide and unblinking, a scene that made every heart in the room seize. "He must have died in a fit," the doctor murmured, pressing a hand against the heart. But then his eyes fell under the bed. "Good God! How on earth did this get in here?" Reaching under, he pulled out the creature. Still coiled, it slid across the polished floor with a harsh scraping sound, and then stopped, utterly still. It was a snake, but only in appearance, a stuffed snake. Its lifeless eyes were nothing more than 2 dull shoe buttons.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear, told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.